I was standing there, holding a paper plate with lukewarm ribs, trying to smile like I hadn't just been insulted in front of 30 people. Chad's mom, Loretta, raised her wine glass and said loud enough for the entire backyard to hear, "She's a terrible mother, just like she was a terrible wife." People laughed. Not all of them, but enough. Chad's cousin snorted into his beer. His aunt bit her lip, failing to hide a smile. Someone muttered, "Well, she's not wrong." Like I wasn't even there? My hands shook so badly I almost dropped the plate. I felt the heat in my face before I realized I wasn't breathing. I wanted to disappear. I looked over at my son, Miles. He was sitting quietly by the patio steps, swinging his legs, pretending not to hear. But I knew he did. He always hears. I caught Chad's eyes from across the yard. He didn't say a word, just grinned at his mom's joke like it was some kind of twisted family tradition. And maybe it was. The Maddoxes have always had a way of turning cruelty into entertainment. I never thought I'd be their favorite punchline. I told myself to stay calm, not for them, for Miles. Then, out of nowhere, Miles stood up. I didn't even see him walk away. One second he was on the grass, and the next he was climbing onto a white plastic chair in the middle of the yard. He didn't say anything at first, just stood there, 6 years old, wearing his little Spider-Man t-shirt, blinking into the sun. Everyone turned to look. A few chuckled, thinking maybe he was going to sing or say something cute. Loretta was still mid-sip when he said it. "Grandma," he said clearly, "I have something Dad doesn't want you to know." Just like that, the air changed. The laughter stopped. The drinks were forgotten. Chad froze. I saw his whole body stiffen like a man caught in the middle of a lie. He stepped forward, hand out. "Miles, come on down, buddy." But Miles didn't move. He looked at Loretta with those big brown eyes and said it again. "Grandma, I have something Dad doesn't want you to know." The silence was so loud I could hear the wind chimes clinking by the porch. Nobody laughed. Nobody smiled. That's when I realized something was about to happen, something that couldn't be undone. And the most unexpected part? It wasn't coming from me. It was coming from my son. I didn't go to that barbecue to impress anyone. I went for my son. Miles had been asking to see his cousins for weeks. He missed them. I said no the first few times Chad asked if I'd bring him to his family's annual backyard get-together. I knew better. But the night before the barbecue, Miles was lying in bed, tracing stars on his ceiling with his flashlight, and he said, "I don't want them to forget me, Mommy." That was all it took, so I agreed, against my better judgment, against Ray's advice. She's my sister and has never once hesitated to speak her mind. When I told her, she said, "Jessa, they don't get to humiliate you twice. Don't give them the audience." I promised her I'd keep my head high, stay quiet, and leave early. I wore jeans and a plain blue blouse. Nothing too much. I brought Miles in his favorite shoes, the ones with the little dinosaurs on the soles that left prints in the dirt. We arrived 20 minutes late to avoid the early crowd, but it didn't matter. The moment we stepped into that backyard, I felt it. Like walking into a house still echoing with a fight you didn't hear but can feel in your chest. Chad greeted us with his usual fake warmth. Big grin, one-arm hug, sunglasses still on. "Hey, you made it," he said, kneeling to high-five Miles. "There's the main man. Burgers are on the grill. Go grab a juice box." Then he looked at me like I was the hired help. No hello. No eye contact. Loretta was on the deck, sipping from a tall glass of sangria. She waved at Miles with her signature tight-lipped smile, then turned to someone behind her and said, "Well, at least she can deliver the child on time." I pretended not to hear. Pretending is second nature when you've survived a marriage like mine. I found a quiet spot near the fence where I could keep an eye on Miles and avoid the worst of the gossip. A few of Chad's cousins came by to make small talk. One of them, Lisa, said, "I don't know how you do it. I'd go nuts being a single mom." I smiled and replied, "You just do what you have to." What I didn't say was that I already had gone nuts, once quietly and all alone at 3 a.m. while trying to figure out how to afford school shoes and therapy in the same month. Miles was playing tag with his cousins, laughing, running through the sprinkler. Yeah, he looked so happy. That's what I held on to, but Chad's family has this way of making you feel like you're always auditioning and always failing. Every smile is a scoreboard. Every joke has teeth. Loretta especially has this talent for slicing you open with a compliment. "Miles looks taller," she said at one point. "Must be all those processed foods. Kids do grow faster on chemicals." I had just taken a bite of potato salad when she said it, the line that would echo in my ears for days. She's a terrible mother, just like she was a terrible wife. There was no warning, no build-up, just a well-placed dagger in front of a full backyard. People actually laughed, not all, but enough. Enough to make me feel like I was standing naked in the middle of that perfect lawn, drenched in someone else's shame. I caught Ray's eyes from across the yard. She wasn't supposed to come, but she showed up 20 minutes after I did. She saw the look on my face and started walking toward me. She had her phone in her hand, already typing. Seconds later, I felt my phone buzz. "Ray, let's go, right now, you don't owe them this." I looked back at Miles. He was crouching near the flower beds, gently holding a butterfly on his finger, completely unaware. I stayed. For him. Because I knew he'd feel it if I dragged him away now, and I wasn't going to let Loretta take that from him too. So I stood there, pretending it didn't matter, pretending I hadn't just been humiliated. I told myself I'd count to 60, and then we'd leave. I had just reached 30 when I turned around, and Miles was gone. I scanned the yard. Then I saw him, climbing onto that plastic chair like he was stepping onto a stage. Everyone turned, and the moment he spoke, the world shifted. Miles had never done anything like that before. He's shy by nature, thoughtful. He'll whisper things to me at night like, "Do clouds get tired?" Or "Do grown-ups have nightmares too?" But he's not loud. He's not dramatic. That's Chad's specialty. So when I saw him standing on that chair, his little fists clenched at his sides, his chin tilted up, my heart sank. Not because I was embarrassed, because I knew he had something to say, and I wasn't sure the people in that backyard deserved to hear it. He looked like a child about to deliver a speech to Congress, standing there in his damp Spider-Man shirt, knees slightly shaking, face set with determination. "Grandma," he said again, his voice louder this time, "I have something Dad doesn't want you to know." A few people chuckled nervously, unsure of whether this was a joke or some weird kid antic. Chad definitely thought it was the latter. He moved toward the chair with his fake dad grin, one hand raised like he was about to pluck Miles off stage. "All right, buddy, that's enough. Let's not make a scene," he said through clenched teeth, still smiling like we were on a reality show. But Miles didn't budge. His voice didn't shake. "It's not a scene. It's the truth." Chad stopped mid-step. Something shifted then. A weight dropped into the air, the kind of silence that comes right before a thunderstorm breaks open. Loretta looked at Chad, then at me. She was clearly annoyed, maybe even threatened, but still smug enough to think this was some kind of harmless outburst. "Let the boy speak," she said, as if she was giving permission. I didn't know what he was about to say, but I could feel it pressing against the moment like a wave about to crash. "Miles," I called gently, "you don't have to." But he didn't even look at me. "Daddy says mean things about Mommy on the phone when he thinks I'm sleeping," he said, steady and sure. "He says she's useless and broke, and that she ruined everything." A few people gasped. Some looked away. Loretta blinked, her mouth slightly open. The woman who always had something to say suddenly had nothing. Chad stepped forward again, no longer smiling. "Miles, that's enough. We've talked about this. You don't need to bring up private conversations." Miles cut him off. "It's not private if it makes people sad." And that was it. That was the moment the tension broke, not with shouting or drama, but with a child drawing a boundary more clearly than any adult in that yard had ever dared. Chad's face turned red. His mouth opened, then shut. He looked around for support, but the crowd that once laughed along with Loretta wasn't smiling anymore. Some looked embarrassed, others awkward. A few were watching with quiet fascination, like they were witnessing something too personal, but too real to look away from. Loretta tried to regain control. "I'm sure he misunderstood. Children exaggerate. They don't always—" "I know what I heard," Miles said simply. And that was the part that cut deepest. The calm in his voice, the certainty. He wasn't angry. He wasn't crying. He was just telling the truth. Ray moved beside me and whispered, "You okay?" I nodded, but I wasn't. Not really. I felt exposed, like my private pain had been unzipped and laid bare across a lawn full of people who once believed I was the villain in Chad's version of the story. But in that moment, I wasn't ashamed, because for the first time they were seeing my son, really seeing him, not as a prop or a shared custody trophy, but as a witness. Chad muttered something under his breath and walked back toward the house. Loretta didn't follow. No one said a word for a long while. The air felt heavy, like a storm had passed but left the sky bruised behind it. Miles stepped down from the chair and walked back toward me. I knelt to his level, brushed some grass off his knees, and kissed the top of his head. "Why did you do that?" I whispered. He looked up at me, those serious brown eyes full of something bigger than his age could hold. "Because you didn't say anything," he said, "and someone had to." I held Miles close, right there in the middle of that yard, while people stared and pretended not to. His arms wrapped around my neck, his little heart beating fast against my chest, and I realized something I hadn't dared admit out loud. He didn't just do that for me. He did it for himself. He needed them to know that he saw everything, that the games Chad played, the words Loretta threw like darts, none of it was hidden from him anymore. I had spent so much time trying to shield him, trying to take the hits alone so he wouldn't have to see the ugliness. I swallowed the insults, the passive-aggressive jabs, the lies Chad spun about why our marriage ended. I let Loretta paint me as unstable, difficult, impossible to live with, because I thought it was better for Miles to have peace than to have truth. But he saw it anyway. Kids always do. They might not have the words. They feel the shift in the air, the cold shoulder, the tight smile, the way silence cuts harder than shouting. And now he had spoken. I stood up, holding his hand. I could feel every pair of eyes watching us as we walked toward the back gate, but no one stopped us. Not this time. Chad stood on the deck, arms folded, jaw clenched. He was trying to decide if he should follow us or save face. I didn't look at him, but I knew he wouldn't chase us in front of his family. He only fights when the audience is gone. Just as I reached the gate, Loretta called out, "Jessa, wait!" I turned, mostly out of instinct, expecting more venom, but she didn't sound cruel. She sounded small, shaken. She walked down the steps slowly, her sandals clicking on the wood, her glass of sangria still in hand. "He's just a little boy," she said, as if that excused what had happened. "He is," I replied, "and somehow he still knows better than the adults in this family." She opened her mouth to respond, but nothing came out. The weight of the moment pressed against her, and for once, she seemed to feel it. "I never told him to say any of that," I said clearly, for everyone still pretending not to listen. "I don't coach him. I just love him. That's it." Loretta looked down at her drink like she wanted to disappear inside it. "I don't need your approval anymore," I added, "but I do need you to stop pretending I'm the only broken part of this picture." And then I turned and walked out, Miles's small hand still in mine. Ray was already at the car, leaning against the door with her arms crossed, eyes wet but proud. "Took every ounce of self-control not to tackle that woman into the grill," she said. "Same," I replied, laughing through the ache in my throat. We buckled Miles into his booster seat, and I climbed into the front, finally letting out the breath I'd been holding since I stepped onto that lawn. Ray started the car, and we pulled away in silence. But not the heavy kind of silence. This one felt lighter, like the noise we left behind couldn't follow us. Later that night, after Miles was asleep, Ray and I sat on the couch with mugs of tea neither of us drank. She turned to me and said, "You know this changes things, right?" "I know. Are you ready for that?" I thought about it for a long time, about how many times I'd tried to be small to stay invisible just to keep the peace, how many lies I let slide, how many smiles I faked for the sake of appearances. "I think I finally am," I said. That day something broke, but something bigger opened. I'd always assumed my son would grow up protected by the silence I kept, but what he needed was permission to tell the truth. What I needed was to stop apologizing for being the one who walked away, even if it meant walking straight into their judgment. That moment, Miles on the chair, me at the gate, Loretta speechless, Chad exposed. It didn't fix everything, but it shifted something permanent. And sometimes That's how healing starts. Not with an apology, but with the decision to stop waiting for one. The next morning, I expected backlash. Chad would text some half-baked warning. Loretta would leave a voicemail layered in guilt and thinly veiled threats. Someone from the family would reach out and say I'd made a scene or put Miles in the middle. That's how it usually worked. But it was quiet. No messages, no calls, just the sound of Miles watching cartoons in the living room, feet tucked under him, one sock off, one sock on, like nothing had changed. But everything had. Later that afternoon, Ray called me from the grocery store. "Did you see Loretta's Facebook post?" she asked, barely able to hide the shock in her voice. "Number why? What did she say?" She said she was deeply reflecting on how pain moves through generations. She didn't name names, but she said children have a way of bringing truth to light. She even quoted that thing Miles said about secrets that hurt people not being private. I sat down on the edge of the bed, completely still. "Are you kidding?" I said. "I'm not." She turned off comments so no one could say anything, but it's there. Public, I didn't know how to feel. That woman, who once told me I was lucky Chad married me at all, was quoting my 6-year-old son on social media. Part of me was furious. Another part was confused. But the loudest feeling in the room was something else. Something like validation. She had heard him. Really heard him. That night, Chad finally called. He started with what I expected. "I don't know what you told him. He never used to talk like that. This isn't healthy, Jess." I let him finish. I let him rant for a full minute before I said a word. Then, quietly, but firmly, I asked, "Do you know what's unhealthy, Chad?" Teaching a kid that love means staying silent while someone you care about is torn down. He tried to laugh it off, to pivot. "He's a little boy, Jess. He doesn't understand the complexities. He understands more than you ever gave him credit for," I said. "And I'm done pretending he's not listening, because he is. He always has been." There was a pause, a long one. Then he said, "So what? You're going to let him speak for you now?" "No," I said. "I'm finally speaking for myself. He just had the guts to do it first." I hung up before he could say anything else. It wasn't about being rude. It was about ending the conversation the way I should have ended so many before it, on my own terms. A few days later, Loretta showed up. I opened the door and found her standing there with a brown paper bag of muffins and a look I'd never seen on her face, uncertainty. "I came to apologize," she said before I could say anything. I stood in the doorway, not stepping aside. "To me or to him?" "To both of you," she said, "mostly to him." I looked over my shoulder. Miles was in the kitchen coloring. He hadn't noticed she was there yet. She held the bag out. "These are from the bakery on Sycamore. He likes the blueberry ones, right?" I nodded slowly, surprised she remembered or cared. "I don't know what to say," she admitted, her voice unsteady. "I never thought of myself as cruel. I thought I was protecting my son. By tearing down mine." That hit her, hard. "No," she whispered. "That wasn't right. I see that now. I really do." I didn't invite her in, not that day. But I took the muffins and told her that if she wanted to show she'd changed, it had to start with actions, not words. And to her credit, she nodded. Before she left, she turned and looked at me. "He's brave, your son." "He's mine," I said. "Of course he is." That night, Miles asked if Grandma was still mad. "No," I told him. "She's thinking. And sometimes that's harder than being mad." He tilted his head like he was filing that away in his big, curious mind. "Did I do something bad?" he asked. I looked him right in the eyes and said, "No, you did something brave. And you told the truth. That's never bad." He nodded slowly. I was scared. "I know," I said, pulling him close. "But you did it anyway. That's what makes you strong." And in that moment, I realized the most powerful part of everything that happened wasn't what Miles said, or how Loretta reacted, or even the fact that Chad was finally losing control of the narrative. It was this. My son saw what was wrong, and he believed he had the right to say something. A few weeks have passed since the barbecue. The grass has probably grown back where that plastic chair once stood. The folding tables have been packed away. Whatever decorations Loretta put out, her little patriotic napkins and string lights, have likely found their way into storage, waiting for another celebration, another photo op. But I still think about that afternoon every single day, not because it hurt, though it did, not because of what Loretta said or what Chad didn't say, because of what my son did and what that moment revealed about the person he's becoming, and the person I've become too. There's a moment after a confrontation where your body is still humming with adrenaline, but your mind finally gets quiet. That's what I felt the morning after the barbecue. I was brushing my teeth, staring at my own reflection like I hadn't really looked at myself in a long time. Not just looked, but seen. I didn't look angry. I didn't look broken. I looked like a woman who had walked through fire and finally stopped apologizing for smelling like smoke. It's strange how long you can carry shame that doesn't belong to you. I carried it when Chad cheated, when he told people I was impossible to live with, when Loretta would look at me but like I was the reason her son didn't call on Mother's Day. I carried it through the divorce, through custody hearings, through nights when I couldn't sleep because I was afraid I was failing my son. But that shame was never mine. It was something they handed me, and I accepted it because I thought I had to. Not anymore. That day in the backyard when Miles stood on that chair, he didn't just defend me. He gave me permission to put that shame down, to see myself the way he sees me. Not perfect, not always calm, but safe, loving, enough. He showed me that protecting our children doesn't always mean hiding the truth. Sometimes it means letting them speak it, even when their voices are small and shaky and unexpected, especially then. Since that day, things haven't magically improved. Chad hasn't changed. He still tries to control the narrative when he can, still plays the victim when it suits him. But the power he had over me is gone, because now I know I'm not alone in the truth, and neither is my son. Loretta hasn't called since she dropped off those muffins. I haven't chased her, and I don't need to. If she wants to rebuild something with Miles, she'll have to do it from a place of honesty. No more snide comments, no more sugar-coated cruelty. And if she doesn't change, that's on her, not me. For the first time in years, I don't feel like I'm living under someone else's story. I'm writing my own, slowly, carefully, but with confidence. Last week, I printed out a picture of Miles from that day, standing tall on that plastic chair, his little face squinting in the sun, mouth open mid-sentence. I framed it and put it on my nightstand. Not because it was cute or funny or Instagram-worthy, but because that was the moment everything shifted. That was the moment my son reminded me I'm not the woman they said I was. I'm not a terrible wife. I was a woman in a marriage with a man who never knew how to love without power. I'm not a terrible mother. I'm raising a boy who knows how to speak up when it counts. I'm not weak. I'm just done carrying weight that was never mine to hold. So if you've ever been in a moment like mine, frozen in a room full of people who think your silence means defeat, remember this. It only takes one truth to break a lie, and sometimes that truth comes from the smallest voice in the loudest room. Let them speak, then stand beside them. Because the moment you stop shrinking to keep others comfortable is the moment you finally take your power back. And once you have it, no one gets to steal it again. Not a man, not a mother-in-law, not anyone. So if this story made you feel something, if you've ever been underestimated, silenced, or told you weren't enough, I want you to know you're not alone, and your voice matters. If you felt connected to this moment, take a second to like the video. It helps more people find stories like this, stories that don't sugarcoat real life. Share it with someone who needs to be reminded of their own strength. Comment below. Tell me your thoughts, or share your own story if you're ready. I read everyone, and if you want more raw, real-life stories like this, subscribe to the channel. This space is for anyone who's had to fight to be heard, and I'd love to have you here. Thanks for listening. Thanks for feeling this with me. And most of all, thanks for believing in truth, no matter who it comes from. I'll see you in the next one.